Good morning. So I'm here with Lee Baird of Tenacity. I've known Lee for 3-4 years now, I think. I actually met Lee because someone asked, I work for Vanderbilt, he used to work for Vanderbilt. After this weekend, I will probably no longer work for Vanderbilt, but that's beside the point. Someone sent an email across one of our mailing lists and said, what's the best way to secure VNC? And I just happened to be in that kind of mood one morning. So I answered them, and I gave them a very technical but thorough explanation of, tunneling traffic through an SSH, or SSH tunnel rather. And I finished that, and I was just kind of in a snarky mood. I hit the enter button, go back to what I'm doing. About 20 minutes later, another email comes across about the list directly to me and goes, dude, that is the first time at Vanderbilt I've heard someone actually give a solid security-related answer to something. And next thing I know, we're hanging out.
Too bad no one will understand what it means.
Yeah, too bad they'll have to look it up on the internet, and then they'll get tired and go back to their crappy job.
Right.
So we started hanging out every once in a while. We go drink some beer at the corner pub down the street and all that fun jazz, ride motorcycles here and there. So, and then he went off to greatness and left me at Vanderbilt to my lonesome. So I'd tell everybody where you work, but you won't tell me. So that's sweet. I appreciate that.
No problem.
So we'd have been asking everybody, one of the main questions we'd asked was if you have a story about a mentor in your life that helped you get started, and who that person might be, and a little story about him if you've got one. Apparently no one said anything because you have that deer in the headlights look.
That's okay. I would say the mentor in my life, the biggest one, is the community. Starting out using BackTrack back in 2007, I mean, I knew nothing about Linux whatsoever. And I just started getting on the forums and getting involved with offensive security and people over at the BackTrack, and just started asking questions and getting in on IRC, especially on the Bash channel, AWK and SED channel, just going in and asking questions and getting beat up to death because I was so new. But a couple people took pity on me, Martin being one of them, and helped me get focused a little better and start working on my career. I definitely think reaching out to the community is a great place for education and just getting problems solved in general. So on with the talk. Like Trevor said, my name is Lee Baird. I'm with Tenacity Solutions, and this talk is on setting up BackTrack and automating various tasks with bash scripts. I do malware analysis in DC now. Before that, I was doing enterprise security assessments for Fortune 500 companies, doing network exploitation, wireless social engineering, and physical engagements. So what is BackTrack? This is a little overview of what we'll be covering, setting up your virtual machine, information gathering, Nmap, Metasploit, and then trying to automate all this stuff with bash scripts. So what is BackTrack? BackTrack is a Linux-based security distribution. It contains many tools for security assessments. It comes in 2 different flavors, 32-bit, 64-bit. There's 2 different types of desktop environments, those being GNOME and KDE. It can be ran on bare metal, a live DVD, US thumb drive, or a VM. And the best price is that it's free. So where can I find it? Go to backtracklinux.org. You can go there for you can choose your different types of distros that you want. There are how-to sections. There's a great forum section, which is where I met Martin on there because he was beating up on everyone. Anyway, they got a really nice wiki, and there's also links there through training through offensive security. So the first thing we'll talk about is setting up your VM. You want to grab the latest version of BackTrack, which is BackTrack 5 R3. Choose your environment, whether it be KDE or GNOME, and 32-bit or 64-bit. They also have a VMware version that has VMware tools already installed. It's 32-bit GNOME, and it's about 2 gig in size. So when you're setting up your pen testing lab and such, if you're on OS X, you'll be using VMware Fusion 4 or the new 5 that just came out. And for Windows, VMware Workstation 8 or 9. Now, VMware Workstation also has a player version that is free. It's great to get started, but the big drawback about player is it doesn't have snapshots, and we'll get into that just a little bit later. So when you're setting up your VM, you want to use anywhere between 1 to 4 gig of RAM. If you're just running from the command line, 1 gig is more than enough. Depending on what other tools you're running in the background, you might want to increase your RAM. So for example, if you're using Metasploit Metasploit Express, I would bump that up to 2 gig. And if you're running Rapid7 Nexpose, I would definitely bump that up to 4 gig. Nexpose is a great vulnerability tool, vulnerability scanner, but it's very, very processor intensive, and it's a huge RAM hog. So definitely wouldn't want to run that with less than 4 gig. So there's some basic steps here. I'm not going to read these exactly to you for setting up your VM. If you're just new and getting started, I would definitely suggest downloading the VMware version, so your tools are already installed. Logging in for the first time with root and Tor, please, as soon as you log in, change your password. I hate to say that, but you have to do it. So the next thing is fix your splash screen, reboot, log in with your new password, start up the GUI, and then, very important, take a snapshot. Like I said, with VMware Player, you're not able to take a snapshot, but with Workstation and Fusion, you are. The big thing about this is because you're going to start installing new tools, you may break some stuff. You want to be able to get back to a fresh install. So definitely take a snapshot. You should do that, especially with all your victim VMs that you'll be setting up as well. So here are the instructions for installing VMware tools. If you decide to download the ISO version, you can download these slides off of Adrian's website, so I need to read those word for word. Big thing about installing VMware tools is you'll be able to cut, copy, and paste in between your host and your virtual machine. So here are some of the tweaks that I like to do when setting up my BackTrack VM. The terminal is where you're going to spend most of your time. Here are just a few different things. I bump up the font size because I'm literally blind. When you go to the eye doctor and he said, read the chart, the E, I can't see the E. So change the color around a little bit. The big thing here about the terminal is by default, it's set to 512 lines for scrolling. And when you're doing any type of assessment, you're going to go way past that. So you want to make sure that you set that to unlimited. Gedit is a text-based editor. Again, a few changes that I like to make. I like to see the line numbers, highlight the current line, tabs, set that to 5 instead of 8, and different color resolutions or color settings that you can put up. One thing you can do, I would suggest this only doing this at your home for auto login. You definitely don't want to do this if this is your production box. It's a way so that after you log in with your credentials, it's just automatically going to run StartX for you, boot it up. So Firefox, definitely want to go ahead and update your Firefox because it doesn't ship with the most latest version. There are a few plugins that you might want to install, those being Firebug, Tamper Data, and Web Developer. Those are some basic plugins that you'll definitely want to get used to. Here are 4 bookmarks that I like to set right off the bat. The first one being Metasploit Express, and then Nessus, Nexpose, and the last one. Does anyone know what NSE? Scripting. What kind of scripting? Nmap scripting. Exactly. So right here is the web page for all the Nmap scripts, and it's a great thing to refer to, as we'll show here just a little later on an example. So I started putting together a bunch of scripts for BackTrack for various purposes. Here's where you can download them. It's off of the Google Code site. So if you just go to googlecode.com, type in BackTrack scripts, that should be the first hit that you come up. So you want to pull those scripts down, and you definitely want to put them here to the ops scripts directory, and then give your scripts executable permissions, CD in here, and then you're going to run your setup. So what's the setup do? It creates SSH keys. It sets up various aliases to help make your productivity a little bit higher. Installs FileZilla, and it installs a tool called xdo tool that's leveraged in one of the scripts. The setup script also pulls various tools from either the SVN or the GitHub repos. Some of the tools are under constant development, like Metasploit. You could literally update Metasploit and there'll be changes every hour to that. So the BackTrack repo doesn't always carry the latest version because they want to make sure everything's been thoroughly tested for the community before they push out a new package. But I like to take advantage of some of the latest additions, especially with Metasploit. Some of the other tools that are pulled are DNS Recon by Carlos Perez, which is an amazing tool, the Harvester, Jigsaw, like I said, Metasploit, Nmap, and SQL Map. So some of the aliases that you'll be able to have now, just quick key shortcuts, C for clear, L for listing out the screen in long format, CL, clear and list, E for exit, R takes you to the CDs to the root directory, clears the screen, and S takes you to the scripts directory and clears the screen. A couple other things, I does an ifconfig and pings Google 3 times. Use this all the time when you're out on assessment and running a tool. The tool stops. You're like, well, did the tool crash? Did my script crash? Did I lose network connectivity? Just open up a new tab, hit I, pings Google 3 times. Yes, I've got network connectivity. Something's wrong with the tool. No, I don't have network connectivity. Maybe I lost my IP address. Another useful alias is N, which does it. Netstat minus ANT UP, which gives you your interface, your MAC addresses, your internal and external IPs, and lets you know what all ports that you are listening on and any external IPs that they are connected to. Another miscellaneous alias is SIP, which I call for sort IPs. It correctly sorts a list of IP addresses. So for example, on the left-hand side, if you did a sort against the file host, it would sort it as such, which is incorrectly numerically. And if you do with the alias, it gives you the correct. I use this all the time. You could also use sort minus G will do the same thing. Any questions on the aliases so far? Okay, so the one that you want to use all the time is update. And the reason I came up with this, when I was traveling as a consultant, you're always running around like crazy on Sunday, packing, trying to get to the airport, and the last thing you're thinking is like, oh crap, I need to update my distro really quick before I walk out the door. The same thing when you're leaving the hotel in the morning before you get to client site, you're like, did I update this, did I update this? Now all you have to do is type in update, and it will grab the following updates to various things like date and time, your entire BackTrack distro, aircrack, DNS Recon, and so on. ExploitDB was actually hacked a few months ago, and Mutz had disabled the SVN Recon. It was enabled again recently, and this past week has quit working again. So you may or may not get results with that. Your mileage will definitely vary. But like I said, this is a quick way, down and dirty way to get your distro back up and running very, very quickly. So moving on to a recon for black box engagements. What all different types of recon do we need when we're doing a black box engagement? Bueller, anyone? Wow, okay. So you might go into a client and the only thing you have from your client is their name. Maybe it's just Microsoft. You know nothing about them. They're like, okay, you've got 5 days to do an external test for us, and we're giving you no information at all. So you've got to go out there and generate all your own recon, which you'll be using, use that for social engineering, might be a component of your test. You're going to need to scrape different names and email addresses so that you can pass off to different members of your team. And you're like, okay, where can I find this? I know there's a ton of information out there about company XYZ, but I need to be able to find a lot of information in a very short time. So I've written 2 scripts for that, and one of them is called Open Source Intelligence Gathering, and the other one is called Scrape. So first one with Open Source Intelligence Gathering, you can either give it a company, search for a company, or by a person. So for the company option, it's going to download information from DeepMagic, into DNS, and RobText, and it's going to create the following folder and pump out your data into the 3 files right here. and it's also going to open up multiple tabs in Firefox with various URLs. So with this bash scripts, the great thing about these scripts are you can get into them and you can modify them, you can break them, and you can tweak them to make your own. So I know everyone out there has their secret squirrel URLs that they like for gathering information for people or companies and stuff. Go in and add these. So tweak it, like I said, make it your own. The websites that I like to use are Aaron, IP, InfoDB, Netcraft, Shodan, Jigsaw, Pastebin, do some Google hacking, Edgar, and Google Finance. So this is where you would type in the URLs that you're more familiar with. So with the Google hacking, we're going to search all the URLs for a particular name, and the site operator, or the special operator we're using is the site, and we're going to search for particular file types. For example, Excel, PowerPoint, Word, PDF, and text. For persons, again, these are just the URLs that I like to use. Substitute whatever works best for you. So Scrape is the other reconnaissance tool, and there are two different types of modes with this. There's a passive mode and an active mode. Again, it's combining various tools that are already in the BackTrack distribution. So on the passive side, it's leveraging the following 6 tools, which are GooFile, GooMail, GooHost, the Harvester, Metasploit, and Whois. So you're like, well, how can I use Metasploit in a passive way? Metasploit has various different auxiliary scanners, and one of the auxiliary scanners is an email harvester. Thing is with each one of these tools that you may run on their own, you'll get various degrees of results with each. So what I'm doing is aggregating the results of all the tools and doing a sort by unique and give you the best bang for your buck. On the active side of Scrape, we're leveraging a few different tools here, which are DNS Enum, DNS Recon, DNS Walk, Traceroute, and LBD, which is a load balance detector. Any questions up to so far on Recon? Okay, moving on to the Discover side. So we go in, the first thing this is going to do is do a host discovery. It's going to generate you a target list. You can also do a ping sweep. You can feed it a single host, a URL, your local area network, list of hosts, or CIDR notation. So basically, this portion of the script is going to do a huge nmap scan, and that's going to give you port scanning, service enumeration, and OS identification. So where I got my nmap script from, the nmap string from, which I should have pasted up here. But if you open up Metasploit Express and you're doing a discovery out of that, you can see the actual string that he's using, which is about as long as my arm. And then I've also added in other high-value ports, and the reason, and those ports that I add in are as Nmap comes out with new different types of scripts for a specific port that are not discoverable, I will add those ports in. So as we were talking about earlier, NSE stands for Nmap Scripting Engine. As of last week, there's about 432 scripts. This is kind of a new addition to Nmap within probably the last 18 months to 2 years. The scripts are growing weekly, and there's a lot of updates to these scripts. So people are constantly updating them, fixing bugs and such, which the reason those are added to the update alias. As it's going through and doing your Nmap scan, it's building out different lists, different port lists for you. So it's going to go and do high-value port lists like 21, 22, 23, 25, 53, 80, and so on. So when you're done, you're not only going to see an Nmap scan, but inside of your folder, you're going to have a file that's it's called 80txt. So this will be all the IPs on your network that have port 80 open. You can then pass that off to your web application guy, or so on. So on the Metasploit side, after this is done, Metasploit obviously is an exploitation framework. It has database integration built into it. I'm going to be using the auxiliary scanners for that. I am not using any of the brute force scanners, mainly just using this for enumeration, and we're going to be, how we're implementing Metasploit is by using resource files. So Metasploit will take a resource file. Basically, it's just a file with a set of instructions to execute. Those different instructions that I'm using are the various Metasploit auxiliary scanners. So previously in the script, like I said in the Nmap section, it's going to go through all the hosts that it found, and it's going to pull out, let's say, port 21. So you'll have a text file, 21.txt. You're going to run all the Nmap scripts that have to do with enumerating FTP, and it will turn around and do the exact same thing with the Metasploit auxiliaries. So, automation. Why do we need automation? You need a repeatable process, and you don't want to miss any steps. When you go back to a client in 6 months or a year, and you definitely want to be able to give them the same type of repeatable process that you had the last time you were there. That way you can go in and you can overlay metrics to exactly what has been patched, what is new, and what has been mitigated. That's going to add value to your client. So what all can be automated? Now, time for presentation. And, all right, let's see here. Any questions on Nmap scripts, Metasploit auxiliaries, resource files? Yes?
Yeah, I got one. I'm not very familiar with the Metasploit resource files, but when I have to script out stuff using Metasploit, I'll just run MSF-CLI from a script. Is using the resource files faster than running MSF-CLI?
Well, so for example, when you're MSF CLI for command line interface, instead of giving it that long string of the exploit you're using, the local host, the local port, and your payload, you can just put that into a text file and then call that text file. So as you boot, as you start Metasploit console, you can give it a switch to actually load from that file. Okay, great. So I'm going to try and do some live reconnaissance here if the network holds up. So I've got 4 virtual machines running in the background. I've got Metasploitable 2, Windows 7, XP Pro, SP2, and SP3. All right. So when you download the scripts directory, this is what you're going to find inside. Like I said, the first thing you would do would be run your setup script. After that's done, the main framework is called Discover. This is what it looks like. So first you have 2 scripts for your recon. Like I said, it does, you're going to gather emails, names, URLs, whois, DNS, traceroute, and load balancing information. For Discover, we'll do host discovery, port scanning, service enumeration, OS identification using Nmap scripts, and Metasploit scanners. There are a few other things here for web. So for example, someone gives you a list of URLs that you want to check out, and you want to be able to open those in Firefox really quickly with multiple tabs. Easy for that. There is a way to help you automate Nikto. As part of the setup script, we installed a tool called XDoTool, which my friend Wrench from here in town turned me on to. So basically, if you have found, let's say, 10 web servers in the company, and you'd like to use Nikto, instead of Nikto by default runs in series, which can take forever. With this script, with XDoTool, you're able to run that list of IPs in parallel and just open up a different tab, each of those running Nikto at the same time. I've tested that with up to 32 different servers at the same time, and it had no problem. SSL check is a script that myself and Jason Arnold wrote for checking for various types of SSL findings. Crack Wi-Fi is another script that I co-wrote with Jason Arnold for doing WEP and WPA cracking. For example, for a resource file for Metasploit that we were talking about, here's an easy one here for starting a Metasploit listener. And it takes about 20 seconds because it's got to load the framework. When it loads the framework, it's got to load all the modules and all the plugins. Having network connectivity yet? Yes. Okay. So here are all the resource files that I've put together. So for example, we're doing the listener right now. So let's take a look at the listener. Basically, you're using an exploit multi-handler, setting a payload to Windows Interpreter, reverse TCP, setting up the IP as your local host, local port 443, and exploit-j puts this into the background. So any type of thing that you can use from the MSF CLI, you can put into a little resource script and call that from here. And that's still running. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have for FTP. So currently we're using two different Metasploit auxiliaries, which are for checking for anonymous login and for FTP version. So every port that is open for 21 that you have discovered with Nmap, it's going to run these two auxiliaries against that for you automatically. Again, we're not doing any brute forcing, just further enumeration. So, and that's what it looks like when your listener listener resource file is done. So that's one example of that. Okay, so everything is menu driven here. So the first thing we're going to do is pick on a company that Trevor and I used to work, or that I used to work for, that Trevor probably will used to work for come Monday. So definitely when you're bash scripting, you're automating different things. Like for example, this is going to hang for probably about 15 seconds. It's very important that you speak with your users as far as giving them feedback. Like some of the scripts, like when you're doing a top level domain enumeration, it could take anywhere up to 8 minutes. A lot of people are not going to sit there and go, wow, is the script stuck? You know, what's going on? Let the user know how long this particular task is going to take. So it tells you that supporting data folder is located at root Vanderbilt recon, and then press return to enter. Now, this is where it's going to go through and open up multiple tabs on Firefox for those different domains that I told you. Again, let's just go and open up this while that's doing that. So basically, you're just giving Firefox with a / new tab switch and with the URL that you choose. Yeah. Okay, so this is finished. So some of these are going to be pre-populated. Some of them are not. So we've got Google Finance here, the Edgar database. Here's all the different types of. All right, so now we're searching Vanderbilt for file type TXT, 11,600 results. And you can start combing through these for different types of information. that they leaked out there that they shouldn't have. 274,000 PDF documents. Almost 16,000 documents, whether DOC or DOCX format. Almost 5,000 PowerPoints. And about 1,500 Excel files. Again, like, well, I don't care what they have out there. Well, when I was doing this, I did a conference back in West Virginia, and the company I was picking on was Marshall University, which is where I went to school. As part of this, I was able to pull up where somebody had posted grades out to the web accidentally. Luckily, the CIO was there, and I had talked to him beforehand about this as I was testing out the demo, and I was able to let him know that immediately. He was able to make a phone call and get that situation corrected. So, okay, so Pastebin is another one that pull information from. Jigsaw is a great resource. So they've got 10,000 different employees within their database here. It's a great place for mining, for social engineering. Also, Shodan picked up just over 100 different IPs here for Vanderbilt. Why scan stuff externally when you can let somebody else do it for you? Okay, so get rid of these. Again, digging through all this Google type of hacking will produce some really good results for you. Shodan, so let's get rid of these. IP address locator will give you the physical location of the IP address. And a little bit of information from Netcraft. The IP address, hey, now I know what type of web server they're running. I know the type of IS that they're running. I know the location where the servers, and I can see that there's a last change in July, which means Vanderbilt probably hadn't patched that server since July. So any 0 days that came out with since then, they're probably vulnerable to. And same thing, oh, look, they got a VU custom server. That's awesome. Okay, so that's some type of passive reconnaissance that you can do against a client. Let's see what other files that we were created. Okay. So here's basically a DNS health check. And you'll be surprised where a lot of people fail different parts of this. Again, just more reconnaissance for you, passive reconnaissance, I might add. These are results from Rob Text. Great thing about RobText is it creates this nice little pretty graph for you. So you can kind of get an idea of what their network looks like. Okay, and we also have from Deep Magic the PTR records. So different IP addresses that we found. Let's do a little stuff here. Let's do. Okay. Okay. So we're just kind of looking for any types of names that might stand out to us in this list. What doesn't follow the normal naming pattern? Okay. Again, this is all passive. You're not hitting Vanderbilt servers at all. Okay, so let's do some active. Okay, so this is going to use 9 different tools for reconnaissance. And this one will take a little longer to do. So while this is scanning, does anyone have any questions on passive or active reconnaissance that we went over so far? All right. So again, like the top level domain, it could take up to 8 minutes depending on the size of your company. If you're going after, like, say, Netflix, it could take 10, 15 minutes to run. Vanderbilt's a lot smaller, so it should take just a minute. Okay, so while that's happening, now let's see. Okay, so while that's running, I wanted to give a couple shout outs for people that have helped me out with this. Jason Arnold and Dave Klug. Pretty much with Jason Arnold, he sat down with me and helped me plan out the original concept and how to break down reports so that you get a lot more granularity detail. He's also the co-author of SSL Check and Crack Wi-Fi. Dave Klug, a really good friend of mine, helping to do planning, again, testing, a lot of bug reports. Matt Bannock helped me with the original develop. Eric Milam helped me do a total rewrite of this using functions and some speed enhancements and for locating domain controllers. Martin Boss also here for some ideas on IDS evasion, and numerous people in IRC, specifically Bash and the SED channels. E36 Freak was huge for me. I can't tell you how many times I've been bugging that guy for quick little fixes, and he was always right there. Okay, that's almost done. Okay, so for example, Jigsaw is one of the ones that I use. If you don't like Jigsaw, if you care to use something else, you can just come in here and put in the company of your choice or your URL of choice. Okay, this is almost done. So you can see DNS walk is disabled because I was having some problems with that script. Okay, so your scan's complete. Okay, so here's what we pulled back. We pulled back name servers, mail servers for Vanderbilt, IP address. It's tried various zone transfers. Getting into Carlos Perez's tool here, more enumeration. Top-level domains. So with the top-level domains, you will probably have to go in and filter out some of those, but you have a really good base, a starting point. Come on. DNS zone walk, and it does some pings to try to give you your trace route, and then no load balancing found. Okay, so that's some idea of active reconnaissance that you can pull. Again, we're probably doing this in under 10 minutes. Okay. So let's do a discovery scan on our local network. And we're going to do an internal scan. Test. So the reasons it asks you for if you're doing an internal or external scan. If you're doing an external scan, it's going to set the source port to 53, and internal scan will set the source port to 88, which is Kerberos. And while the Nmap scan, it's going to send you back information back to the user every 10 seconds. Okay, so I'll explain to you kind of what's going on here. This has done the initial host discovery and initial scanning for Nmap right here. And it's going to come down and it's going to locate high-value ports. This is when it's going to create a bunch of different IP lists, like I was telling you, that's going to feed in to the Nmap scripts and to the Metasploit auxiliaries. Next, it's running through each one of those Nmap scripts, the categories of Nmap scripts, rather. MS08, 067, love this, use it all the time. I can't believe 4 years later people haven't patched their systems for this. So as this particular one is scanning, it should show you the IPs of this as they happen. How am I doing on time, Trevor? Awesome. Okay. Okay, so I can see that two of my boxes are vulnerable to that, .138 and .139. Okay, so it looks like we got a problem with one of the Nmap scripts right here not working. So obviously the boxes that we've scanned have FTP, SSH, Telnet, SMTP, these services running. Again, we're just going through further enumeration with the Nmap scripts. Okay, so now it gives you a point. Do you want to run the matching Metasploit auxiliaries? We do. Those are the resource files that it's going to be using now. So now it's booting up Metasploit, which will take about 15 to 20 seconds. And it's going to go out and grab the resource file for each one of those services and run that through it. The biggest way here is wait for the Metasploit framework to load up. Okay, so the Metasploit framework's loading, and it's starting to run through each one of these resource files. All this information that you're seeing right now is being logged into the database by default.
You mean logged into Metasploit's database?
That's correct. So,
So do you pull that back out of the database?
sure do. So it actually goes in the database. It actually renames the workspace to whatever you gave it. Let's see what I grabbed up here. So I was able to grab in and look at all the processes running here.
Was that SNMP enumeration that just rolled by right before this?
Right now we're using this auxiliary.
What about the one before? Yeah, was that SNMP
Well,
enumeration?
let's see what we're using here for that. Yep. Again, with Metasploit, there's new auxiliaries being added all the time. So definitely every day when you run your update script, which, let's try that now. So that's like an example of using the I shortcut in. Go ahead and show me my internal, external IP, what services I have listening. R takes me to the root directory. S takes me to the scripts directory, and let's run an update. So we're updated the time, updated the BackTrack repo. Now it's going out and grabbing the latest stuff from Aircrack NG. DNS Recon, Exploit DB is working today. Jigsaw. Set. The harvester. All right. So those are all the main tools that I use. I ran this script right before I came down here. Normally you'll see it. But when you run setup for the first time and you do update, it will literally take you about 30 minutes to patch everything on your system. Okay, what else do we grab here? Okay, so it's finished running all those. Now what it's doing an export of that database for you and dumping that out. Okay. So your scan's complete, and here's where all the data is. Okay, so this is what our folder looks like. All these files up here are individual files that are going to have IP addresses just for that particular service. So, for example, I'm going to do cat. These are all the boxes that are running MySQL, and so on and so forth. Banners host. Okay, so right there is your Metasploit database of all the information. Yes. Oh, okay. So there's the Metasploit database that it just dumped. If you're running Metasploit Express, you can go ahead and dump this into Express to give you a better visualization of the data that you've collected. Right here is scan XML. Again, I would dump that into Metasploit Express. Here are all the different script outputs, and we've put everything in together into report. So this is what we look like. So it gives you start time, the date time, the IP of the scanner, what version of Nmap that you're running, the IP addresses of the hosts that were discovered, the open ports that were found. We found 34 open ports. Here are the TCP ports and the UDP ports. We found 31 different banners. So high-value ports, high-value hosts by port. The individual files that I showed you. So for example, right here, that's where all these files are. So it's going to tell you 2 hosts are running FTP, 1 SSH, 1 Telnet, and so on. So this is just kind of a high-level overview for you. The next part is the actual Nmap scans. That's just been cleaned up a little bit. And then right here is the Nmap scripts showing you further enumeration. Anonymous FTP logins not allowed. Bunch of SSH enumeration. Telnet, SMTP. Server is an open relay. DNS, PC. Again, if you're not using Nmap scripts, I highly suggest it. There's a ton of extra information that you'll be able to gather about a host running these. Here's the SNMP. MySQL enumeration, the database tables, database users, variables. That's what the report looks like. Again, I would suggest importing the Metasploit XML and the scan XML into Metasploit Express for a better visualization of your data. And that's all I got. You can download these scripts at Google Code. Here's the link. You can ping me on GTalk if you have any questions, and that's my contact information. Any questions? Thanks, everybody.